We have done a drawing of this. I've talked about how we do the drawing. We have also done a value study looking for where the light and dark patterns are going to go. And then we had a discussion about how to start this. And so once we sort of decided on a game plan, then I like to sort of forget about the later steps and just think about what my first steps are and get those done. So we had decided that the first step needed to be a blue wash. We're going to let it dry, and then we're going to come in and do a yellow wash. And the blue wash, it's going to come across the top and down this side and may or may not come into here. It could come into some of this shadow area. Don't want it too thick down in this area, but the brown can have blue in it. The greens can have blue in it, but we don't necessarily want much blue in some of these other things. So that's going to be a thinner down in there, and let it dry. And then I'm going to come back in and do a yellow wash coming in from this side and through some of these areas. And through this sunset area here. Now, something to think about is how much yellow we want underneath of this water. So I've got to think about whether or not I'm going to wet this area when I do that other wash, or maybe pick this back out. I want a touch of yellow under there, but not as much as I'm having up here. So I'm going to have to play with that when the time comes. And then the third wash is to come in with a pinkish wash, which is going to be down in this horizon area, and some of the pink can come in and underneath of the browns in here. Then once that's totally dry, then we'll start working all of our darker areas in the piece. So all I'm really going to get done today is those 3 layers of washes. Okay, so I'm going to set these aside where I can see them, sort of what's happening with it. Set this one aside, although the value study, this is going to be more important in our next area after this. So I've mixed a cobalt blue with a little bit of phthalo blue to make my blue sky. I'm using New Gamboge for the yellow, and then the red, it's a mixture of quinacridone rose and a little bit of the New Gamboge to make a slightly peachy color. I am going to let that dry between layers, but I mixed those all up to start with. So first thing is nice clean water. I've got a little bit of a lift here so that my piece is running down toward me a bit. So when I go to put this wash on, I want to let it run pretty fast and easy. I might even have to lift it a little bit more to really get it to run. The wetter that I put these clean, clear washes on, the more they're going to be smooth. If I have them too dry, you're going to see brush marks all over in them. But if they're nice and wet, then the paint will just run on here. So we want this, what I would call soaked. So I want this where the water is just ready to run off of this page. I'm going to be sure I've caught everything and that I don't have any dry spots. Now I could put this on with this big fat flat brush, or I could use my round brush. So flat brush or round brush, I could use either one of those. I'm thinking I'm going to do the flat brush. Now remember when we were talking about it, we're going to go across here and then just down into here with that blue. So let me just pop this in. And it's going to run some, so excuse me. I want this to be what's called a graded wash, so it's going to be darker here at the top and get lighter as it comes down. And so there's a point here where I need to just sort of stop because it's going to be more yellow-orange. Now that goes into trees in there. I don't mind that too much. This can get a little bit of blue in here, but I don't really want that figure to have blue on it. And then it's going to get blue out here in the water. And it can get blue in underneath of all of this sand. So I'm just, some areas I'm just not wetting, and I'm letting those figures back there, they can have blue on them. This can have blue all the way in through up to where this grass is here. hopefully Kat doesn't decide she wants to come in on here because she's looking at it like she's thinking about it. Her sister is down in the window. And a little bit into this shadow area, a little bit in through there. Okay, and oh, he can come up into that shadow, and I don't care if it gets on the legs of that guy. I just don't want his jacket to have it. Shadows are coming in there. Let's just do a little bit up into that. And yes, this is all blue. It can be. And we want a light blue and a dark blue in that water. So coming in here first with this light blue is just a sweet thing to do. And those trees, you know, even those trees, let me just bring that up into those trees just a little bit because it's going to be easier to let it play up into them than not. It's going to be dry a little bit lighter than what we have. And okay. And then if we want to pick it out of anywhere, like I don't really want it in the top of that log, let me just clean my brush, dry my brush most of the way. And this pathway is brown. It's going to be more yellows in here, so we don't want this too dark a blue in here. And let me just take my brush and sort of come uneven up into there. Okay, and let's take a little bit of blue out of that, add a little blue over in here. All right, and what else? It's going to have shadow across there. That doesn't matter if it runs through there. Let me just let it run through there. That's dark in there. Let me just make that a little more even. All right, so this has still got a lot of shine on it. With a lot of shine like this, I can roll this around a little bit, but I don't want to come back in with my brush at this point because if I do, I'm going to get brush marks all over the place. So we're going to let this dry completely before I come in and I do my next layer. If I've got a lot of water accumulating down here at the bottom, I can come in with my rag and just pick up those edges to pick up the little bit of water that's there. Put my hand underneath it here so I don't get my fingers on it. And just pick that off of those edges just a little bit and then let it roll back out into there a touch. Okay. So this is now going to have to either sit and dry or get dried with the hair dryer. And I think I'm going to let it sit and dry. If I let it sit and dry, it's going to be, what do I want to say? I'm going to just come in with this. This is still a fairly damp brush, and I'm just going to pick out some of these wind lines in here. And when I do, it's going to push the paint away just a little bit. I want it a little bit lighter across those guys and just behind them. I want to keep those wind lines almost parallel, but they don't have to be quite because it's wind coming down in through here. It's a little lighter in those places. But I still want it almost horizontal on those lines because if I do them downward, they're not going to look right. They have to be either horizontal or very close to horizontal because the wind sort of works its way, just like this pathway. It works its way down across that water. And just keep that. Okay, I need to stop with it. Don't touch the sky, Margaret, because you want that really smooth. This water, it's going to get a little bit of back and forth on it, and it looks nice to have that, have some little lines in it. But down here further, it's not. And actually, let's just, this is where those rocks are. Come in with this brush again and just do a little lifting where those rocks are going to be so that the blue is not quite as dark, and it's okay if it's a little uneven. And this is still just a damp brush, no water on it. I've dried the brush almost completely, but not entirely. Okay, now I need to step away from that. I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll come back and I'll do another layer. My blue layer is now completely dry, and I need to decide whether I'm going to not wet this water area. I'm thinking I won't, that I'll come in and I'll wet just to that line and then come and wet down onto this ground. It's all fairly hard lines, so it should work out fairly well. And then the yellow can come down and into these other areas. So yellow is going to be my next wash. Then we'll let that dry, and then we'll come back in and we'll do a pink wash on there, and then we'll start building all the colors. Okay, so we are not going to wet that water. Let me turn this sideways. I've got nice, fresh, clean water. And let's see, here's my horizon line right here. Easier to turn this sideways. You can pull a straight line by going vertical, where if you try and do this horizontally, the way our shoulder is built, our shoulder and arm, we want to do a crooked line. So I'm going to just go ahead and wet this all down while I've got it turned this way. And I want to do this very gently so that we're not lifting up the color that I put down before. Now when I do, and I'm going all the way up into the blue because I want a soft line between the yellow and that blue. So that's something always to be considering. You know, do we want a soft line? Do we want a hard line? If I bring this where it's dry, that's going to be a hard line. If I have it wet, then I can get a nice soft line. Okay, so then as we come over into here, now my little figures, I don't really want to wet them either, so let me just go around them. And notice that I'm holding this brush way at the back so that I'm not grasping it too tightly. I want to have this sort of happen with a gentleness and just keep my movements loose. All right, so the rest of this page is going to get wet. So I painted the edges of that because that was the hard part. And our figure 2, he's going to get white or yellow. So not going to have a lot of yellow on him, but there's going to be yellow now. Let's look through here and see what I did. Okay, up to, and I'm looking at this sideways, because if I look at it sideways, I can see where it's wet and where it's dry. And since there's no color in my brush, I can't see what very well what I did. So I'm going to get this down and then I'm going to look at it from the side. And I have a feeling that you guys are not seeing this quite right. Let me just, okay, hopefully that's better. When I moved it around, it changed the angle, and my view with my camera is pretty tight on here, so I might have to stop for just a minute and go up and double check. Okay, that's that. That's that little piece there. And once again, I want this relatively wet. So let me just wet it a little bit more because I want that color to run in here. Okay. Look at this from the side. Yeah, looks like I'm not missing anything. It's a little wetter right in there, so let's just go ahead and pull that down. There's something here. A piece of popcorn, I'm not sure. I want to do this with this brush. First of all, let me just, I'm not going to put that right at the very edge. I'm going to come up with it just a little bit and then let it run down to where that stop point is. And let a little color run out of those guys. And same with these trees. And now let's go ahead and just start putting yellow down. When I go to put the pink on, that's going to bring a change to this as well. And I might end up wanting to, okay, so I'm going to need to bring this down in here just a wee bit more because that is not coming down to that edge. Okay, there, now it is. And can be a little stronger down in here where this ice plant is, and I'm just sort of touching it with the, and of course wherever it's dark can definitely have yellow in underneath of it. Whatever your last color is that you put on is going to become the dominant color. I'm thinking I've gotten a little bit too strong with the yellow up there in the sky. So what I need to do is rinse my brush, dry it halfway, 3/4 of the way, and come in here and remove some of this. I don't want to introduce more water because if I do, it's just going to run like crazy. But it just felt like it needed to just get eased off a little bit. It was a little too strong in there. And I'm going to, while this is still wet, I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of that pink to it right down here at the bottom. And it's okay if it goes behind those trees because they're going to go dark. So that can come right on down into here. This will also help keep that from turning the sky into a green. And I'm feeling like maybe we want to also do a little bit of that pink in here. This is the areas where it's really sort of rocky, sandy, and isn't at all green. Feels like it really could use this right now. I still want to let some of that yellow show through. So once again, I'm working really delicately. I'm doing a lot of horizontal marks here. So this pathway, and I don't have a very wet brush at this point, it's a bit drier, so because it's a bit drier, then the paint isn't going to move as fast. Let's say I can go right over that shadow area, bring this in right next to where that log is. This can get a little pink in here. So the pink, I could have waited and done it after it was totally dry, but I sort of wanted some soft edges in here, and I wasn't necessarily going to get them quite as soft. Of course, you run a little bit of danger doing this because I might lose too much of that yellow feel. So I've got to be careful about doing this everywhere. Where it's green, we definitely don't want any of this pink to go in there. But where it's dark, I can do it. And where it's sort of that muddy pathway, and this is beach over in here. Okay, where else? And where was this dark? Up into there. Okay, I think I should stop at this point. I don't want to overdo this. His pants. Okay, that's already starting to dry, so time to stop on this. One other little place that I would like to be a little bit lighter. I'm going to really almost dry that brush, and I want to come in and just lighten the edge of this with a barely damp brush to get that highlight on there a little better. I don't want to introduce extra water, I want to pick up paint. And so if I come in with too wet of a brush, and same with his shirt. Okay, I'm going to do a pointy brush, really dry it. It's damp, so almost dry. And so we want to get this yellow off of his hat. And lighten his jacket just a little bit. Doesn't have to be white because it's not even up there. But that's better. So now that stands out better. And we're going to be going darker back behind there, so I'm not real worried about it. Just a bit of lightening there. And ooh, maybe down here on his shoe, right at the edge of that shoe. Anything else that really felt like it? Careful about this getting too dark in here. Rinse that brush really good. So again, we're going to just, it's not white there anyway, but it's just, it's lighter than, so. Okay. Time to stop. So this is now going to have to dry. So I've now done blue, yellow, and red in here, and we did the red and the yellow in the same wash so that we could get some nice soft blends between that. And I'm hoping that this is going to be what I want. Before moving on with this painting, I wanted to be sure that I had not gotten it too dark. You know, I was feeling a little bit like I had, but when I started to when I set this down onto my page, and I need to take it out of its little shiny holder here so we can see it even better. I was looking at the values in my photograph, and his shirt, if we put this value card up, his shirt is actually slightly darker than, oh, but not as dark as value 8, between value 8 and value 9, and his hat is just about value 9. This highlight along here, if we get that right up to it, it's at about value 9 for the lightest parts in there. And this part of the sandy beach, look at that. It's way up in here at about somewhere between 8 and 7. And so in the highlights out of it, that's what I'm looking at, is the highlights. It's a little bit darker than value 9. That's closer to value 8. So then when we go to look at, and the highlight on that log is at about value 9. Look at that. That's even lighter than value 9 there. So that's going to be fine. Same with his shirt. It's lighter than value 9. And the beach area up here, look at that. It's at about value 9. It's lighter than value 8. And even up in the sky up here, we're at about value 9. I thought maybe we were going to be a little bit too dark. But I think we're going to be fine. So once we get the darks put in there, look at that, how that comes out. Once we get the darks in here, then that's going to work out just great. But I do want to do one thing, and that is that it's a little darker up here and grades down. So that means I either need to lighten this area or I need to darken that area a little bit. And I'm thinking, since the values seem to be coming out, that area is right in there between value 10 and value 9, that rather than trying to lighten this, because the only way to do that would be to take something like Mr. Clean Magic Eraser to it and then maybe get streaks in it, that I'm actually going to put another wash on here and put just a little bit of dark on that edge. But I'm only going to do it down to this horizon line and maybe bring it down to that horizon line right there. So let's wet that much, gently, gently, gently. Oh, and let me just put a little bit of water into my blue here to get it started. I have a little bit of blue left from yesterday. So let this dry overnight. Once it dries, it always lightens up a little bit. And so frequently when you're painting it, you think, oh, it's way, way too dark. There's no way that this is going to work. And I'm wetting this all the way down to the horizon just because I want a very soft edge between my blue at the top and this in between. And if I don't wet it all the way to a place that has a hard line, then I'm going to end up with hard lines where I don't want them. This way we avoid that, even though the paint's not going to go all the way down in this. And yeah, looks like that did a nice job of wetting around that. We've got too much water right there. And this is right on that horizon. I'm looking at this from the side to see if I've got this right on the horizon or not, because I had it just a little above it. Okay, that's nice and wet. Now, I'm going to turn it, I'm going to turn it this way so that it, although it bleeds into there, it's not going to run into there. And I don't need it a whole lot darker. I'm going to add a little bit more cobalt blue to that. So I'm just going to put this along this edge here. Try and be a little more controlled here. And now I'm going to take and turn it and let it run a little bit. It's just, I'm hoping this is going to do what I want. Yeah, it's starting to come down there. Let's roll it around a little bit. Rinse my brush, clean it just a little bit. And I'm going to just work it just a wee tiny bit on the bottom edge of this. Maybe add just a little more dark right at the top edge. Okay, that's feeling more like, oops, I got to get that right into that corner. That's feeling more like what we want, and let it. So if I put it totally vertical like this, it's going to run a lot faster. I just wanted that little softness. Yeah, now this is looking lighter in between there. And I could actually, while this is wet, let's just try this. This is one place that it just felt like it was a little too dark. Just picking that up just a little bit while this is wet. It's nice and shiny wet, so I can do this. If it wasn't shiny wet, I couldn't. But, okay, now I need to stop and get away from it and leave it at that, so that I like that we're getting a grade. And now to keep that a grade, I'm going to turn it up this way for it to dry so it doesn't keep on going down into there. And now it'll tend to run back into this top edge. And just to be sure that we don't have too much, I'm going to just take my brush along this edge to pick up any excess water that's coming this way. Because I don't want, if I have too much water and it runs back in here, then as it dries, it's going to want to bleed up into this. I've got one little spot here that I don't really like. This is dry here, so I'm going to just do a little lift right here. This was that edge between beach and water. Just wanted to soften that one little spot. Okay. Okay, now I can let this dry. So we've got a lot of mid-tone in here. Our next step when we go to build this up will be to find the darks and brighten some of the colors. So now if we were really worried, keep a lid on this because my cat has discovered that it's fun to carry sponges around, and then when I want them, they're not there. So I still am feeling like this needs to be a little bit lighter right on this edge. So Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, I got it damp. I need to do a little bit more. Dampen it and then wring it out so that it's damp. And I'm just going to rub on this edge of this area that is going to be light bright grass. This is dry down in here. Remember, we didn't wet it. We only wet up in there. This area of brightness, I'm a little bit concerned that I got too dark there. So just lifting a little bit off. And where was my other place that I was feeling that maybe the top of this got a little bit dark. Okay. Now let's move that away from where our wet is. Okay, once we get darks in there, it's going to look totally different. So I'm going to let this dry.